How nice. Okay, all right. Hi, everybody. As the sign says, I'm Elin Howe. I teach art history at Meadowbank College, and there's a lot of familiar faces in the audience today, I must say. I don't know whether I'm just going to preempt my talk with, I suppose I've been very interested this week to be reading about Sam Leach's problems with the Wynne Prize. But for me, I was quite pleased about it because it's very apt. It absolutely relates to what I'm going to talk about today. Are you all familiar with what's gone on with Sam Leach? He's been accused of stealing an image, and that term appropriation comes up, and that is something that's this is central to what I'm going to talk about today. Okay, so. I want to begin by giving you a bit of a personal context for this talk. As the promo says, I'm an art history teacher, and I've been teaching art history in both the university and the TAFE sectors since 1987. I've had two formal art educations. The first one in the 1960s when I just left school. I was very young, teenager. And the second one in the 1980s when postmodernism was just starting to appear in the Sydney art world. When I returned to study in the 1980s, I imagined art history would be the same boring subject that it had been in the 1960s. And I did not look forward to it, I have to say. I was the nightmare student. I resisted it in every way I could. I saw it as something that took me out of the studio. Back in the 60s, art history lessons were, and I'll give you a bit of an explanation for why I was dreading it so much, they were slideshows of famous works from all periods in Western art history. And the only attempt to contextualise the images that we were looking at was a rather cursory acknowledgement of the artist's name, the date and the title, and perhaps a broad sort of contextualising phrase like the Renaissance or the Baroque or whatever. And that information was all stated when the slide first flashed up on the screen. But the terms were pretty meaningless to me as a 17-year-old, and I didn't bother trying to make any sense of them or remember them really, because it was very apparent that bit of stuff was out of the way, and then the whole talk would then focus on the formal qualities of the image. And by that I mean media and composition. We never talked about content in the image, and I've always been an ideas person, so I found that very frustrating. These things that we were looking at were, these images we were looking at obviously had stories, but there was no talk about what was actually happening in the image at all. Neither was there any attempt ever made to locate the appearance of the image in some kind of historical, social and cultural context. Endless time was devoted to the juxtaposition of the red next to the green, or the tonal qualities evident in the flesh of the model, or the energetic brushstrokes, or the surface impasto, or whatever. Form, only form, and surface. So as a teenager, I had no sense that I was getting an education shaped totally by the dominant concerns of the art world of the day. It was the early 1960s. Clement Greenberg, who might be a name that is familiar to any of you. Anybody heard of Clement Greenberg? He was a critic who made his reputation during the 1950s and 60s, largely writing about abstract expressionism, which of course is all about form, impasto, surface, all of that sort of thing. So Clement Greenberg's formalist approach to contemporary art prevailed, and it infected every discussion of any image. Of course, what Greenberg, as I said, was writing about was abstract expressionism. Formalism was central value in high modernism, especially architecture and design, and the mantra form follows function had enjoyed currency for a good part of the 20th century. So there we were, a bunch of teenagers looking at Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel ceiling paintings, and hearing about the closed linear quality of his representations, when these images were clearly about more than that. Art history, it was absolute torture. Art history just seemed to have absolutely no relevance at all to me. So this is why I was dreading it when I went back. So I went back in the 1980s, just as postmodern theories were starting to impact on the academy, and therefore the teaching of art history. To my great delight, the art history model had changed. Now, the context in which the artist had produced the image really, really mattered. We heard context, context, context all the time. Works of art were to be seen as documents of their time and place, so the geography of the appearance of the image mattered too. Form was only part of a much more complex picture. Content counted. Images were about something, and whether the artist meant to or not, his or her images told us something about the period in which they were made. Suddenly the whole area became absolutely fascinating to me. So what I want to do today is take you through the story of my own journey through and coming to terms with that term, appropriation. I'd been schooled, it was a funny, when I think back about it, it was a very odd education in the 1960s, because I'd been schooled in this idea of originality, which is very much a modernist myth. So you were never allowed to sort of say that you'd got the idea for an image from somewhere else. It was all supposed to be pulled out of your imagination somehow. But then we were encouraged to look at what artists had done, how they'd moved form around on the canvas and so on. So it seemed very contradictory to me. But I did have this idea that originality was really, a key thing, and I couldn't be pinching bits of imagery from anywhere. It was not a good thing to do. It was not an honest thing to do. So when I went back in the 1980s, because the model for teaching art history had changed, there was that kind of secrecy wasn't around anymore, and it was really apparent to me that artists had been raiding their predecessors' imagery for quite a long time, and nobody seemed to worry too much about it in the 19th century or earlier. So what I want to do today is survey a fairly diverse selection of images, and they really are a kind of random selection, because you could do a whole semester's course on this, so I'm just in an hour. I've just chosen some that I think are interesting. So I've chosen artists whose rating of images has different intentions. Some artists are interested in the concepts apparent in the image that they're rating, and that's what they privilege in their image making. And some are interested primarily in the compositional structure, the form, and that's what becomes the focus of their rating activity. So I've chosen a few who pay homage to their predecessors, using gentle humour to do so too. And I want to end with an Australian artist, a woman called Ruth Waller. I don't know whether any of you have heard of her. She's just recently had a 30-year survey show in Canberra. I went down for that big post-impressionist exhibition, and I went to see this show, and I was I'm familiar with her work, but seeing a 30-year survey of her work was a very nice experience. And I realised that she is a great raider of Renaissance imagery, or was in the 90s. So I've included a few of her images right at the end of this talk. Now, what I'm going to do is just introduce you a little bit to the course that I was studying. It was, when I went back to study in the 1980s, it was a modernist course, which is largely what we still teach in the TAFE system. So it starts with the Industrial Revolution, when the modern world is starting to kind of reshape everybody's lives. So there's new technology, people moving from the country to the city. You have the introduction of a new capitalist economy rather than the old agrarian economy. Things are really changing dramatically. And this impacts on the way artists who are trying to represent what's going on in their culture, impacts on what they do. So I'm just going to take you through a little bit of that to get to some of the artists that I want to talk about. So Michael, if we can have the first image, please. Okay, this is a Boucher image by Francois Boucher of Madame de Pompadour. And what's represented here is a piece of Rococo art which it represents the old world in France, the old aristocratic world. And the court artists were in total denial of the revolution that was brewing. This style of very airy, light painting, which celebrates that aristocratic way of life, became a symbol. Rococo style of art became a symbol for the sort of hated and oppressive regime. So it was very quickly replaced, thank you, Michael, by the neoclassical style. Now, here we've got, before the French Revolution in 1784, Jacques-Louis David painting the Oath of the Horatii in this style where he's looking back to antiquity, and he's trying to conjure up. The whole idea is that there was a lot of interest in antiquity. There'd been big archaeological digs in the 18th century which had uncovered Roman ruins in Pompeii, Greek and Roman ruins in Pompeii and Herculaneum. And so there was a great deal of interest in the old world, in the antique world. But also what David is doing here is conjuring up the idea of the Roman Republic, democracy. So, you know, you don't have to put up with this oppressive regime with its airy-fairy, pretty pictures. This is what we should all aspire to, all right? Now, this is, and you know, for me, learning all of this stuff, learning that this is pre-revolutionary, this is almost a call to arms. This is what David's doing, is calling people to arms in a way. To know all of that, to have the context that this is painted in 1784, before the revolution, to do a formal analysis of it is actually, it adds to your understanding of the picture. So the formal analysis here, I mean, formal analysis is a good thing as long as it's part of a bigger picture. The problem with my 1960s education was all we ever got was formal analysis, and we never talked about the content. So I'm just going to do a bit of a quick formal analysis here. You have a look at the three arches in the background there. They work. David has used these to frame his image of each group. So you've got the three brothers here swearing their oath, framed by that archway, then the father with the swords, framed again, and then the weeping women framed on the other side. And he's used a series of very dynamic lines and red. Red will move the eye across the picture. So we've got this dynamic line of the spear, the dynamic lines of the men's legs, the brothers' legs, their arms, the swords. All the men are involved in a very kind of dynamic composition, and then there's that central red of the cloak, which leads the eye over to a much more muted red between the two softer figures, weeping women, and it's been cropped a little bit, this slide, but the woman sitting on the far right is sitting on a little red stool, and that works almost like a full stop. So your eye is actually led across the image he's thought about it quite carefully. It's a very considered image. He's really wanting it to convey its meaning, and he's thought about the composition. So there you see the composition really adds to the meaning of it when you know something about its context. All right. Okay, can I have another slide now, please? Okay, thanks. Now, we also learned, we're just doing a bit of a quick introduction to this course. We also learned about the way some artists were embracing and celebrating the Industrial Revolution. This is Philip de Loutherbourg, Colebrooke-Dale by night in 1808, so we're early in the 19th century. And what you see here is this kind of awesomeness of man-made industrial light. You know, this is Colebrooke-Dale, an industrial town, and you've got the factory fires here burning in the background. Can I have the next one, please, Michael? Thank you. Or Turner, celebrating the steam engine as it crosses the bridge there, a new viaduct bridge with all the steam and smoke, and he embraces the Industrial Revolution. He's very interested in all the technology. There were, of course, artists who were wishing that they'd never heard of industry. Can I have the next one, please, Michael? And we're hoping that they were still in the medieval times. So, you know, here you've got one of the pre-Raphaelites, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, painting a very tubercular-looking Madonna, and wishing that, you know, that they were back in the days before any kind of technology had been invented. And the next one, please. Or William Waterhouse later in the 19th century, another pre-Raphaelite with a very romantic image, the Lady of Shalott. Again, that kind of medievalism infecting their ideas. Okay, next, please. All right, now I want to get on to, I've given you a kind of a broad introduction to the period. Now, what actually happens is modern art, the story of modern art, really doesn't start until the invention of photography. Photography, I mean, there's a lot of other, I'm being very reductive here, there's a lot of other stuff, but the invention of photography takes away the raison d'etre of the artist. From the Renaissance forward, the reason that the artist had been around was to represent the world as realistically as he could, and it was a he. Yeah, I'm just being a bit distracted here by this. So when photography's invented, I mean, the camera had been around for a long time, since medieval period, but once they could actually fix the image onto a piece of glass or a piece of paper, the role of the artist was taken away. It was, okay, guys, if you want to survive, you have to reinvent yourselves. And this is the beginning of the story of modern art. Starts in the 1840s, and it starts really with, what we studied was the realists. And what I want to do today is have a look at Edouard Manet. Is this a familiar image to people? Yeah? Yeah. This is his Déjeuner sur l'herbe from 1863. In the days when Manet was working, the only way that an artist could exhibit their work was to put it into the biannual salon. And there was a jury of people who went around, you know, men with clipboards, and ticked whether the image, you know, met the requirements, met the criteria, and a lot of people were rejected. So Manet puts his image in, and it was rejected. In 1863, there's so many images were rejected that artists prevailed upon the emperor, Louis Napoleon, and he established the Salon des Refuses, which was the salon of the vanquished, if you like, another exhibition of the people who didn't make it into the salon. And if you are at all familiar with our Archibald Prize, you'll know that that's what happens, that there are echoes of this system. It's judged by a jury, and the paintings that don't make it into the Archibald go on up to the S.H. Irvine into the Salon des Refuses. In fact, I think that's all on at the moment. I haven't seen the Archibald yet. All right, so now this is a scandalously modern image, this one. It has two fully clothed contemporary men picnicking with two women in various states of undress. And, you know, nudes had always been safely distanced in history. To have this saucy piece looking out at the viewer instead of, you know, waftily looking off into the distance was also very confronting. And can I have the next slide, please, Michael? This is the typical sort of thing that got approval in the salon. This is the typical sort of image. This is a Bouguereau, The Birth of Venus, from about 1867, I think. But that's the kind of image that got the big tick of approval. In fact, images like that used to regularly win at the salon. So you can see that Manet is really breaking with tradition, and his image is certainly not safely distanced in history. But despite its modernity, Manet had been looking at work from a long time ago. Can I have the next image, please, Michael? Oh, okay. No, I've forgotten. I've left out a little bit. This is a Courbet image of a nude. It's called The Bathers. And Courbet had been also, before Manet, trying to reinterpret the nude. So here you have these kind of fleshy country girls. They're not these idealised marble women. He's making them real, and they're weighty and substantial, and, you know, they're thought of as, you know, working class girls, very sexy. So they had also been quite confronting for the salon audience. Okay, can I have the next one? This is the one that I want to talk about. This is a Raimondi image. It's an engraving made after a Raphael image during the Renaissance. Of course, when there were no cameras, artists and engravers would come along and copy images and make engravings of them so that they could be, people could hear about them, they could be dispersed. I mean, most of Raphael's work's done on walls. It's not then, you know, it's not on a canvas, they're on walls. So this is the Judgment of Paris, Raimondi from 1520, around 1520, so 16th century image. Paris is the figure on the left there. It's the first beauty contest, basically. He's awarding the apple to Venus, who's winning out of those three girls. But the group of figures that we're going to focus on is this group of figures on the right, which is the seated figures, which is the configuration that Manet appropriates for his Déjeuner Célèbre. Okay, can I have the next one, please? I was also amused at this time to discover that this image had been updated and appropriated by contemporary artists and in popular culture too. This is Gilbert Shelton's 1994 image. which is an update of one he did in 1976 to grace the cover of his comic strip, The Fabulous Furry Freak Brothers. And the next one, please, Michael. This is the cover of Bow Wow Wow's album by Malcolm McLaren in 1981. And again, the reconfiguration. Okay. Now, the next big scandal, he made this is Manet again. He made this image in 1863, but he didn't put it into the salon until 1865. And surprisingly enough, it was accepted. It's very much based on a Titian. It's called Olympia. All those nudes were called Olympia or Diana or Venus or something. But she's in no way a Greek god, this goddess, this young woman. She is attended by a black servant there. She's quite flat. There's not the modelling on her body that people were used to seeing. And if I can have the next slide, please, Michael, we'll have a look. It's based on this figure. These two images were used on the promo, I think. This is a Titian image done in 1538. It's called the Venus of Urbino. It's done for the Duke of Urbino, probably to hang in his bridal chambers. We have this beautiful young woman lying on a bed there with a posy of flowers in her hand. She's got two female servants in the background. There is quite a bit of space there. Our eye can travel, even though we've got the screen behind her, our eye can travel back, so there's a bit of pictorial depth there to where the two attendants are. And then beyond, you can see out into the landscape, the sky and whatnot. At the foot of the bed, she's got this little spaniel, which is a symbol of fidelity. And the thing that's really central to this image, why it would have been hung in the bridal chambers, is that sort of masturbatory position of her hand. And it was obviously meant to sort of stimulate sexual love. Now, can we go on to the next one, please, Michael? Yeah, we know that Manet saw this image, and we also know that he made a copy of it 10 years before he painted his Olympia. This is his copy. It's a bit of a poor slide, a bit of a faded slide, this one. But so that, obviously he was interested in the configuration of it. Okay, can we go to the next one? Okay, so if we have a look at this, you can see that there are very distinct differences between this image and the Venus of Urbino. The little, I don't know whether you can see it there, but the little spaniel has been replaced by a black cat. And it's very difficult to see there, but its tail is brushed up. It's an alarmed black cat with its tail in the air and all its hair brushed out. Her face, rather than looking come hither, she is actually looking a bit indifferent. And the position of her hand is clamped over her genitals in a very businesslike way. Now I want to need to return to my script here because there's stuff I'm going to forget to say. Manet's Olympia, although a nude, is not one safely distanced in history. Clearly she's a modern woman, and she's got all of those signifiers. The little black ribbon around her neck, and on her foot is a boudoir slipper. Rather than seducing the viewer with her alluring gaze, she appears aloof and introspective, almost uninterested. Her hands clamped over her genitals, as I said, and the creature at the end of her bed is certainly no symbol of fidelity. By the 1860s, the chat noir, the black cat, had become linked in the popular imagination with promiscuity and prostitution. Viewers of the 1865 salon were in no doubt about what Manet was doing, and the cartoon imagery of the day made this very clear. Now, could you give me the next slide, please, Michael? Okay. Now, I've lost the... it's good, isn't it? I've lost the caption here when I took this picture, so I'll just read it to you. It comes from, it's by Bertal, the 27th of May. It comes from Le Journal à Musson from 1865, and it says, "This picture by Monsieur Manet is the bouquet of the exhibition. The great colourist has chosen the moment when the lady is about to take a bath, something she certainly seems to need." Did you notice the steam coming off her smelly feet? And so, you know, obviously the cartoonists are having a field day here with this. And you see the black cat there, although it has a curve in its tail, and in the image it's sort of straight up. Okay, so can I have the next one, please, Michael? Okay, this is another cartoon from the time, and I'll just read it to you. "Madame, what is it?" Madame says, "What is it?" And her servant, who's a black woman, says, "There's a man that wants to see you on business." And she says, "Show him in." So the assumption here is, and in brackets down the bottom, it's apparently that's the way things are done among certain ladies, problematised. Obviously what they're reading here is that the bouquet is coming from an admirer who's hoping to have a bit of a liaison, and he's probably waiting out behind the screen. So the other thing I want to read you is just some of the stuff that the critics said. The critics were also in no doubt about what Manet was doing. Amédée Canteloube, writing in Le Grand Journal, had this to say: "A woman on a bed, or rather some form or other blown up like a grotesque in India rubber, a sort of monkey, making fun of the pose and the movement of the arm in Titian's Venus, and with one hand shamelessly flexed." They're not saying where, but obviously, you know, it's upsetting. And this is another one from Postwer, writing in La Fraternité Littéraire. "Olympia awakes, weary from dreaming. She has had a bad night, that's evident. Insomnia and colic have disturbed her serenity. Her colour indicates as much." They didn't like the sort of yellow tones on the flesh. "There are two black messengers, a cat, which has unfortunately been flattened between two railway sleepers, and a negress who has nothing about her that recalls the amorous night, unless it be a bouquet bought at the florist on the corner. He is certainly waiting in the antechamber." Okay, so what Manet had been doing was confronting the elephant in the room. Prostitution was an enormous problem in the big European cities. Working class women were not paid a living wage, and to make ends meet, a lot of them went on the street. And Manet here is not representing an elite courtesan in his image. He gives you a working girl, somebody who runs her own show. She's obviously reasonably successful because she has a servant, even though the servant is black, which is that's a kind of not a good thing in 19th century Paris. But, you know, here's this working girl who runs her own show, and she's kept in business by the very men who condemn her, the bourgeoisie, and who are her clients. So, you know, the visitors to the salon were in no doubt about what he was doing. It was an image that was very much steeped in the values of the day and challenging them. Okay, can I have another one, please, Michael? All right. Still with Manet. You can tell I love Manet. He's one of my favourite artists. This is his image of the execution of Maximilian. And again, he's very obviously quoting from Goya's 3rd of May. Can we just go to that and then come back to this one? Okay, so this, you're all familiar with the 3rd of May. The 3rd of May, Goya paints in 1814, you can see I've got it off the web there, 1814, to represent the killing of the insurgents in 1808. So it's a big history painting which is talking about something that happened in 1808, but he doesn't paint it till 1814. And what we see here, it's basically a secular crucifixion. You know, the guy in the white shirt is not on a cross, but he might as well be the way his arms are. And we've got, you know, Napoleon's soldiers here. If we were people from that period, we'd recognise their uniform, who are just acting as a kind of execution, a faceless execution squad, killing the people who've been resisting them. Napoleon III had invaded Spain and under this kind of banner of "I'm liberating you all," and what Goya was trying to do was challenge that notion. Okay, can I go back to the previous one? Thanks. All right, so here, you know, a lot later, we have Manet using that composition. He painted 3 versions of this image, and he had quite a lot of trouble with it. They were never shown. And there's one version in the Tate which was, he cut it up because he knew he could never show it because he'd get into trouble. So he cut it up to try and make portraits out of it. And after he died, Degas went around and bought up bits and pieces of it. So it's quite a bizarre image. It's in the Tate, but there's bits missing. They've glued it all back onto what they could find, but there's kind of bits missing from it. And then there's another one which I haven't seen in America, and that's what this one's taken. That's what this image is taken from. But he made 3 versions of this image in response to the newspaper reports and photographs circulating in Paris at the time. So he was working on this over a period of months. Maximilian was an Austrian archduke who was proclaimed Emperor of Austria, Emperor of Mexico, with the military backing of Napoleon III and a small group of Mexican monarchists. Now, many countries didn't recognise his government, Maximilian's government, including the USA, and France was trading with the USA. When the USA said to Louis Napoleon, "Look, you know, this is not good. We don't like the fact that you're supporting this guy down there," he just pulled his support out, all his military support. Maximilian was arrested and executed, and this is what you see here. And Manet constructed this from a lot of the photographs which were circulating in the newspapers at the time. Now, the paintings, the Goya and this, differ in significant ways, not the least of which is the really shallow pictorial space. You'll notice there's something I haven't pointed out terribly much in Manet's paintings, but the pictorial space, he's very keen on putting a wall or a fence or something so you don't get that depth that you get in the Goya, where, you know, you can see back to the village and the church and so on. And also the shadows are very kind of, it's very contrasty, and a lot of contemporary painters were being influenced by the contrast of photographs that were appearing. So I think the shadows around the legs are very reminiscent of the kinds of shadows that were being produced in black and white photographs. And in Paris, this Maximilian affair had sparked heated debate over foreign policy and fuelled disenchantment with Louis Napoleon's Second Empire. Goya had painted his image as a critique of Napoleon Bonaparte's liberation of Spain, and Manet very knowingly quoted the Goya image, invoking that familial connection. You can't trust this Napoleonic line, that the nephew is just like the uncle. So it had been Napoleon Bonaparte who'd invaded Spain. This is his nephew, Napoleon III, as the emperor in Second Empire in France at the time. Okay, now can I have the next one? I'm just going to stay with Manet just for just a moment longer. In 1897, Paul Gauguin used his, thank you. Okay, the Manet, now the next one, please. Okay, this is the Paul Gauguin. This is 1897. Paul Gauguin used his Tahitian bride, Tehamana, as a model with Manet's Olympia in mind. And this is called Manao Tapapao. In a competitive strategy which a British art historian called Griselda Pollock has identified as an avant-garde gambit, Gauguin has referenced the master. What she says they do, she says this is how the comers replace the old masters, you know, the next generation take away the baton from the older generation. Reference, deference and difference. Okay, now I'm just going to take you through that. Gauguin referenced the master in the pose, and thus, so you've got the nude on the bed, and thus paid homage, deference, and then established difference. If Manet's Olympia had been shocking because she was a working class girl, a prostitute being elevated to the lofty heights of the nude genre, Gauguin was upping the ante by replacing her with a primitive, so we're a bit later in the century, a dark-skinned girl, a brown Olympia, and her pose privileges her buttocks as the focus of sexual attention. So the black maid in Manet's painting has been replaced with a crone, and Gauguin is using Olympia's reputation as a springboard to the position Manet's painting has occupied as an icon of avant-garde modernity. Gauguin is what we call a comer in today's parlance. Okay, so can I have the next one, please, Michael? Thank you. All right, now we've finished with Manet. I've done my little dash with him. I want to now move on to Impressionist Claude Monet. This is Autumn Effects at Argenteuil, which he painted in the 1870s. He's a raider of a different sort. He's a compositional raider. He's a compositional raider of the Japanese prints, which had been flooding into Paris since Japan had opened up to the West in the 1860s. So he never went to Japan, but he was very influenced by all of these images. He was fascinated by the organisation of space, and rather than quoting them in the recognisable way that Manet quoted past masters, Monet raids them primarily for their formal designs. The two Japanese artists that he was most enamoured with were Utagawa Hiroshiga and Hokusai, I can never say this, Katashika Hokusai. Both modern artists in their own culture. Their work is considered modern because they deal with everyday subjects and they represent a transient world. Okay, can I have the next slide, please, Michael? Thank you. So you can see there, even though we're in a different format, he's leading the eye in precisely the same way. Could we just go back to the previous one? Yeah? You see that compositional strategy? Okay. And again, thanks, Michael. And the next one. Okay, this is Monet's Boulevard des Capucines, where you've got that diagonal moving through the image in a very, the diagonal of carriages parked there. Can you see that? Can we have the next one? Okay, diagonal going in a different direction, but this is Hiroshiga, A Sudden Shower over Ohishi Bridge from 1857. Next one, please. Monet, again, the railway bridge at Argenteuil. And the next one, Hokusai, drum bridge at Kameido Tenjin Shrine. There was a very good exhibition curated by Virginia Spate at the National Gallery, it's probably 10 years ago now, but it was a completely wonderful exhibition which drew the parallels, the compositional parallels between these images very convincingly. Okay, so now I want to move on to a few raiders who pay homage in a humorous way to their predecessors. Staying with Japanese printmakers again for a moment, Hokusai. Can we have the next one? Thank you. You're probably all familiar with this. It's a very famous image, Under the Great Wave off Kanagawa, which Hokusai made in 1830. And then we see what contemporary Aboriginal artist Lynn Onus does with it. So he does this in 1994. He's a Koori artist with a very... he had an interesting history. He kind of grew up on the fringes. He didn't have any formal art training, but he grew up on the fringes of the La Perouse culture. And he manages to move the wave. I mean, that whole obsession with surf is a very Australian thing anyway, but he often includes these two characters, this dingo, and the dingo is surfing a stingray there. And the image is called Michael and I are just slipping down to the pub for a minute. So it's his images were, he died prematurely, unfortunately, but he was a very interesting artist. He died, he was in his late 40s, I think. It was only a few years ago. There's a big retrospective of his work at the MCA, which was full of all these dingoes and these ridiculous stingrays. They were everywhere, and that sort of wicked humour. Okay, can I have the next one? Thanks, Michael. Okay, now, again, a contemporary artist. This is Masamai Teraoka. He lived in Los Angeles when he made these watercolour images. They're from his Hanauma Bay series. And this one's called Camera Crew and Blowhole Number 1. He was 47 when he decided to move to Hawaii and do something about his childhood fear of water. So he decided he was going to move to Hawaii and learn to swim. And he was inspired by Hokusai's erotic images. So what he does is replicate their style, but he also dresses his characters in traditional clothes. So even though we're in the water here, but you can see they're not wearing modern swimsuits. But then he gives them modern accoutrements. So, and he did a whole series of work in the 80s and 90s on AIDS, where you have geisha girls sitting in baths, and they're this style of thing, unpicking condoms, you know, that sort of stuff. It's very funny. Can I have the next one? Great. I was pulling these off I was trying to get one of those geisha girls, but they weren't on the sites that I was looking at the other day. This is from the Hanauma Bay series too. This is called Ronin Samurai. Okay, so now I'm just sort of becoming very kind of discursive. Can we have the next one, please? Okay, this is probably familiar too. We'll go back to the 19th century. This is Jean-Dominique Ingres, a bather of Valpechon. And I think I've got a date on that. No, I haven't. But it's 19th century. He painted these, the backs of nudes practically all his life. And you can see that they always have too many vertebrae. They're always a little bit too long. But I mean, even though it's a nude, we can see things about things that tell you about the French Empire. I mean, the woman's wearing a turban, which was something that became fashionable once the French spread there into the top of Africa. And of course, you've got this very Egyptian pattern on the cloth hanging down there. Okay, can I have the next one, please? All right, we move into the 20th century. In 1924, photographer Man Ray, paying homage to Ang, he uses his lover and model, Kiki of Montparnasse, as the model for this photograph, and he inserts those two cello motifs into her back to make her into a musical instrument. You know, this is Paris, 1920s, the Jazz Age, promiscuity, fun, living like there's no tomorrow, and you know, it's very sexist, but it's also quite amusing in that, you know, a woman is there to be played like a musical instrument. But you can see he's paid attention to the detail. She's wearing the turban, and she has this exotic bit of cloth draped around her bottom. Okay, thank you, Michael. All right, now I'm heading into the end of it. I've got just a few more images. There's a Japanese artist. He's a well-known contemporary Japanese performance artist who recreates tableaux of famous paintings, and then he photographs himself. He goes to a great deal of trouble to build sets in which he puts himself and makes himself up and so on. So I've chosen two that I think are quite funny. This one is a Goya image of the Duchess of Alba. I don't know whether any of you have seen that wonderful program that Robert Hughes did on Goya, but he talks about the Duchess of Alba and how he thinks that she was a lot younger than Goya when he painted these images. He thinks that he was totally in love with her and fantasised about her. And he does a very nice analysis of the works. Can I have the next one? This is her in white and her in black. And he talks about, you can't see it in this image, but she's wearing a ring. And one ring has her insignia on, or she's wearing two rings. One ring has her insignia on it, and the other one you can just read Goya on it. And she's pointing down to the ground, and on the ground, inscribed in the dirt, and you can't see it in this image, is Goya facing her. So that's I recommend that program to you. It's very good. He's very insightful, Hughes. Okay, so can we have the next one, please, Michael? All right, so this is Yasuma Morimuro dressed up as the the Duchess of Alba. And he did a series of work called The Daughters of Art History. This isn't one of them, but he's well known for doing this stuff. I mean, if you Google him, so much comes up, it's overwhelming. And the next one, please. And this is him dressed up as the Duchess of Alba in black. Okay. Okay. So now I'm going to close by looking at the work of Ruth Waller, who recently had a survey show in Canberra, as I said. She had an artist in residency in 1990 at the Verdaccio Studios in Tuscany. This time in Italy led her to study the 14th and 15th century masters. She looked at Duccio. I mean, it's really more about the Renaissance space and light that she's interested in recreating. So these are Duccio's, but she also looked at, I've got two, have a look at the other one, yeah. She also looked at the at Giotto's, but just look at the treatment of the drapery there. I haven't seen these in the flesh, so to speak, but one of the things that really struck me when I had my first trip overseas, it's been a funny sort of thing because I had been teaching art history for about 10 or 15 years before I got to do a study tour in Europe and go and see all these paintings that I'd been talking about. And I just kept having epiphanies everywhere I went. It was like, oh, I get it. I see what they're talking about, you know. And certainly when I went to Italy and Florence and saw the Giottos in the churches there, I was completely enamoured with them. They were so beautiful and so touching and so much better than anything in books or slides. The handling of the drapery, I mean, this is the thing with frescoes. You have to paint before the plaster dries so that the paint sinks in. So you've got to, you know, big gestures. The way Giotto handles drapery, it's similar to this, with these big sweeps is really it's very appealing anyway. Okay, can I have the next one? So these are Ruth Waller's hospital paintings where she had been looking, her partner had been very ill in 1994. In fact, it nearly died, and she spent a lot of time in hospital rooms, and she started to think about the miracle paintings that she'd studied when she was in Italy. I think you can see in the way she's handled the drapery on her, on the figure's dress there. It's, there are echoes of it in some of that work that I was showing you. The next one, please, Michael. And here, where she just makes a feature, she had quite a few of these images, where she just made a feature of the drapery around the hospital bed. So they were so evocative and moving. There was just that one little one, and then there was a series of these images of drapery that, I was quite touched by them. And the whole idea of her having looked at the miracle paintings and that notion of the lives of the saints, and then her partner comes through. It was a lovely kind of narrative told to you as you moved around the gallery. I was there on my own, and it was quiet. There's nobody else there, and you can get in the zone. That's museum time, I call that. Okay, I think I've come to the end. Is there another one or not? No, that's it. Okay. So I want to close by saying that hopefully I've introduced you to, I hope I've been able to show you how useful art history is to artists. I've chosen really obvious examples, but the idea that art's just somehow pulled out of the air or pulled out of the artist's head is a complete furphy. Artists have always looked at the work of their predecessors, and the new models of art history let us see that. And I just do want to read this little piece that Sam Leach said, just as I close, little piece that Sam Leach said. He said, Leach had said when the controversy broke that his painting had key differences to Pinnaker's, and that artists had a long tradition of basing paintings on earlier works, a practice known as appropriation. And it's about time that the popular culture actually caught up with what's been going on in the art world for yonks. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, that looks really good. Yeah.